There are a few options that we should discuss with regards to setting up the file for our composite. We need to decide what file size, bit depth, color space, and canvas size we want to work with, as well as how to configure Adobe Camera Raw so that it can hand off the correct type of file. When I'm creating my composites, I typically like to start with a blank canvas and then drag and drop all of my different elements into that canvas. So I'm going to choose the File menu and then select New. Here we're going to customize some of the settings. Before I start creating the composite, I need to know how large this composite needs to be. Now, when I create composites, I create them large enough so that I can print them. In fact, I create my composites so that they're 22 by 22 inches at 360 pixels per inch. However, for these demos, in order to save time as well as disk space, we're actually going to create significantly smaller canvas sizes. In fact, we're going to change the width to 6 inches and the height to 6 inches. The resolution that we select is going to be dependent on your printer. If you're printing to an inkjet printer, most people will choose 300 pixels per inch. Now, if I want the highest quality, I can actually up that to 360 pixels per inch because I know that my Epson printer will use that extra information. However, I also know that most people can't see the difference in most images if they're printed at 300 pixels per inch or if they're printed at 360 pixels per inch. So we can see that at 360 pixels per inch, our image size is going to be a little over 13 megs. If I bring this down to 300 pixels per inch, then we're under 10 megs. So those extra 60 pixels an inch actually do make a difference. They make a difference at 6 inches. So can you imagine at 22 inches, that's going to make a large difference. What I would recommend is that you create a composite at 360 and print it, and then lower the resolution down to 300 pixels per inch and print that and see if you can notice the difference. Personally, I'd rather create my image at 360 pixels per inch, making sure that I have enough information in my file because I don't want to have to rebuild the entire document at a higher resolution. However, for these demos, to keep our file size down, we're going to choose 300 pixels per inch. Now we need to talk a little bit about bit depth. You can see that I can choose between 8, 16, and 32 bit per pixel. When I create my composites, I choose 16-bit. That way I have more information per pixel to work with. And this can actually make a significant difference, especially when I'm applying blend modes or I'm using adjustment layers and I'm trying to composite multiple images. When I do that, I want as much information as I can get. However, for these demos, we're going to lower down our bit depth to 8-bit. As a side note, many of the images that are provided for the demos are also JPEG files, and JPEG files only support 8-bit. As for the background contents, I want to leave them white. I could change this to transparent if I want to, but I notice every once in a while when I flatten a layered composite, if I don't have a background or if that background is transparent, I get a little bit of shift in the tonality in my image. So I'm going to leave the background contents white. The last thing in this dialog box that we should take a look at is color space. It's a pretty complex topic, but basically the color space determines the number of colors that you're going to work with in your documents. And there are 3 common color spaces. There's ProPhoto, there's Adobe RGB, and there's sRGB. Now, ProPhoto is the largest color space, and it contains, for the most part, all of the colors that your camera can capture. But there's a caveat with working with ProPhoto. It actually contains so many colors that your monitor isn't going to be able to display them accurately. And for this reason, when you hand off your files to a color lab or to a printer, or especially if you're going to post them on the web, you might be surprised at the resulting image. So for these demos, we're going to work with Adobe RGB. It's a smaller color space, but it's more similar to the colors that your monitor can display, so we'll have fewer surprises. Of course, if we weren't going to print this image and we were only making it ready for the web, we could move all the way down to sRGB. This is the smallest color space, but since printers can print a lot of colors that aren't included in the sRGB space, I don't want to limit the number of colors that I print. So we'll move this to Adobe RGB, and we're going to save a preset so that we don't have to set this up again. I'll click in the Save Preset button. We'll title this 6 by 6 at 300 ppi and 8-bit. Once I click OK, you can see I can easily access this again by using the preset pull-down. Excellent. Now that we have that set up, we can go ahead and click Cancel, but we're ready to create our composites in the future demos. But there's one more thing that we need to do, and in order to do it, we need a raw file. So I'm going to switch over to Bridge by using the File menu and then choosing Browse in Bridge. I want to open this image of this cactus up in Camera Raw, and the easiest way to do that is simply to click on the Camera Raw icon right here at the top. In the Camera Raw dialog box, I want to create a new workflow preset, and in order to do this, I will click on the workflow hyperlink down at the bottom of the dialog. Here, I'm going to set up the way that Camera Raw is going to hand off the files that we're going to be using in our composites to Photoshop. For color space, it's already set to the same space we just set up, so Adobe RGB is perfect. The bit depth should be 8-bit. I don't want to resize the image and I don't want to sharpen the image, but I do want to open this as a smart object in Photoshop. So I'll enable that, and then under the preset area, we can select New Workflow Preset. I'm going to name this Compositing and then click OK. Once we click OK out of the workflow options, it's nice to know that I can quickly go back and forth between different presets if I wanted to by right mouse clicking, or on the Mac, control clicking on the workflow options. You can see I've got this preset that automatically drops down, so if I do go make changes, I can quickly come back to this. Excellent. I'll go ahead and click Done, and now we're ready to start compositing our images together.